This is Anarchast.
Hi everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I'm Jeff Berwick in Acapulco, Mexico, and I have one of the founders of the Tokyo Tea Party in Tokyo, Marc Abela. How are you?
Fine, and yourself?
I'm doing good, thanks. And the first question I ask all of our first-time guests is, how did you become an anarchist?
I think for most people, just like for myself, it's a long process. I think it started with Ayn Rand 20 years ago. And really, she's an invitation to think for yourself. And so it just took from there, and then I was looking for answers. And then I think you move out of the tunnel, you move out of the social tunnel you find yourself in. For most people, at least, that's how it worked out for me. So I just moved gradually. I started understanding Friedman better, and then moved to Mises, and then moved to people like Stéphane Molyneux, who had obviously a pretty interesting understanding. And so from there, at some point, it just makes so much sense that you just you forget what you understand, and you forget how it used to feel before you understand it. But it's been really a great gradual process, I would say, over the scope of 20 years.
And you've been in Japan for about 20 years, is that right?
Correct, yes.
So you've sort of went down this road once you got to Japan, and so tell us a little bit more about what you've been doing there in Japan.
Well, I've been in Japan for 15 years. I started as a student, so I got a scholarship, and I've been spending a lot of time close to the state, which is interesting because it provided me, I mean, I was already on my way before finding Rothbard or Mises to noticing that something was fundamentally completely flawed, but I couldn't put it into words. I just didn't have the intellect or the experience to really manage to phrase it. My arguments with people would really be complicated. So I've been here for 15 years, and I think traveling, I remember, I think I saw you as well suggesting that you've traveled quite a lot. I think traveling invites you to undo some of the tunnels that people find themselves in when they stay in one country. So yeah, it was easily seduced by all these libertarian ideas. It just made sense, and I just kept pushing them. So yeah, 15 years in Japan. So I've seen a lot of the things happening here, different prime ministers moving. The economy has been in a really difficult position. They've been printing their way out of every crisis. Every time something goes wrong, they socialize the losses. Something goes well, they privatize the profits. And if you repeat that on the course of 10, 15 years, just like you do in most countries, typically governments don't want to lose too much power. So something goes wrong, they increase regulations, you have less companies, less competition. And I've been bathing in Japan for the last 15 years, watching this whole thing happen under my eyes. So I'm just understanding as it's going pretty much.
Yeah, it's interesting. I agree with you on travel really opens your eyes. When I first started to travel the world, I initially started on a sailboat and tried to go around the world that way. And
sure.
It's just amazing how, once you can get outside of a little bit of your own zone, you can really start to think a lot more freely. All of a sudden, things like people would normally say things like, well, we have to support the troops. Well, if you're sitting in Tokyo at that time, then, well, do you mean the Japanese troops? So you start to get out of this concept of your own nation being something that you identify with and that everyone else around you identifies with. So yeah, definitely travel is a great way to bust out of a lot of the brainwashing that we get in school. So are you from Ireland originally?
I'm from Montreal, actually. I'm from Canada.
Oh, sorry.
My parents are Lebanese.
Okay.
I have Middle Eastern blood, Maltese and Lebanese, if you will. But I grew up in Montreal, which is a very everything which moves in Canada is managed by the state, pretty much, from universities to the bus, from healthcare to your pension. The state runs everything, and it really keeps young people asleep for a very, very long time. It provides kind of the worst environment, and so we're just, up until the age of 20 or 25, it's really domesticated human beings. I hate to phrase it that way, but that's how it felt for me, at least. You're just unaware. You're just pushing your paper. A job is not something you go and you do. A job is you write your own resume, and you hope that someone somewhere will provide you with a set of orders That's what you call work in a way. So Montreal was home, and then I came to Japan, and obviously being on my own and traveling different countries, like you said, especially if you move outside the scope of even your continent, like in some Asian countries, I remember people would watch, Muslims on TV, and they would tell me, are these guys the Muslims or the Christians? I can never tell which one is which, kind of thing. And you say, well, wait a second, you can't tell the difference, and it's something pretty important in Montreal, obviously, or other places, or especially in the Middle East. And then you do that to them the following morning. There's this guy who shows up for dinner, and you say, well, this guy has a bit of a weird accent. He speaks Japanese with a different accent. And the guy said, well, can't you tell he's Chinese? And I said, well, no, I'm sorry, I just didn't. And you can tell you've really disturbed them. So all these divisions and all these different groups of people, obviously invited into thinking, into coercive belonging to either a country or religion, and you really have to deal with all these people. So you become kind of a chameleon, and you have to deal with all these different people. But yeah, Montreal is home. French is my mother tongue, so I apologize for what may look like a weird accent at times. But yes.
No, that's fine, and I totally understand what you're saying about Canada. I grew up there as well. I grew up in Edmonton and then moved to Vancouver, and I felt the exact same way. I never used that word before, but I'm going to use that more. That it felt like everyone was very domesticated, and so I definitely saw that. And yeah, the Canadians as a group, I hate to collectivize anybody, but a lot of people up in that area are very brainwashed in the state. They have no idea. They just are told to believe that the state is good, that Canada is the best country on earth, that it provides free health care, and that's why it's the best country on earth, even better than the U.S., because the U.S. doesn't have that yet, and all that sort of a thing.
I have to say, I mean, as much as I love these kids, and it's easy to be fooled. I mean, the first of all, the farmers, because I like this Orwellian. It just makes it easy to speak. It just summarizes the whole concept in a word. But these old psychopaths who farm kids, they manage to take the money they manage to grab the eggs and the milk out of where kids have no clue where the money's coming out from. So they'll tax old people when they buy a house. They'll tax entrepreneurs when they launch a business. And mostly these people are either 50 or older. So a young kid, when they see the farmer show up with a bit of healthcare, a bit of education, it makes sense. Typically it's a farm, and these poor animals who are 16 or 18, they see all these politicians show up with all the promises on the planet, and then once you realize that the distortion and how the whole matrix approach to society that we're living through. Then you wake up to the amount of charlatans in society, and the number of charlatanism, the amount of it is just so astounding that it's almost impossible to believe. Like, for example, if you take the U.S., that out of 350 million people, I don't know how many you have there, that only a few would have enough integrity to stand out there, even if they're in the political realm like Ron Paul or others, and to say things that obviously seem to make sense. And that everybody else, and when I say everybody else, we're talking about 99% of adults in their 50s or 60s, they have kids, wouldn't have enough integrity to really call it, to say, we're just this whole army military thing, it's just too much. At some point, we're going to have to draw the line. Not one has enough integrity to step up and just disagree. So, I mean, it can fool a lot of kids. I can understand how kids, or at least how I myself was fooled into, because it doesn't make sense to have 99% of the people with zero integrity and just like 2 or 3 speaking what's right. It should be the other way around. At least that's how you wish, that's how you think society is built when you're 12 or 14 or 16 and you're full of this, human race is a bit of a decent race kind of thing. And everything that happened in the past is gone. Everything World War II or whatever, the wars, that was a different universe. That was just like something else. We're just crazy back then, but today we're just, we finally matured and then you wake up to the fact that it's much worse today, I would argue, than everything else we've had in the past. I mean, it's almost ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. The
TV.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean the TV, the newspapers, it's everywhere. It's it's almost surprising to think that you really have. Not sure what the numbers are, but the amount of people with integrity who can really stand up and say this is we're heading in the wrong direction, and who understands that all the distortion in the Middle East, or the problems in the economy and the way they dilute the currency, to have only like one or two good guys say the way it should be, and to reflect things with any amount of integrity, and to have 99%, and they're good looking. I mean, I remember younger looking at Kennedy, for example, and I was a conservative when I was younger. I have to say, I was a conservative without understanding what that. I mean, I just liked to be told you should be responsible. I just liked that kind of tough love, even though I had a huge difficulty understanding why would the Conservative Party would always invite crooks like Nixon and Bush, and all these Obama and Kennedy. They just looked. They just made sense. They made complete sentences. The guys, don't ask what the country can do for you. Ask what you. That's the kind of stuff I want to hear, kind of thing. That's the kind of mood I was in. So it took me a while to really wake up to the fallacy of the system. But even then, I mean, there's a huge amount of charlatanism on this planet, and I wish I had been warned a little bit earlier. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I was the same way. I was a young conservative, and exact same reasons as you. I just thought it sounded better than the other option, and
Sure.
over time, I just went away from it. I just said, this doesn't make any sense. I don't know. What I did was I looked at the world and I said, well, we still have a lot of poverty. There's still a lot of war. There's still a lot of violence. How do we fix this? And it seems like we can never fix it. So I looked at the left side and I said, well, that's not going to fix it. And I looked at the right side and that hasn't been fixing it. And so I couldn't figure it out. So I just ended up going on along my way. I went and started some companies and said, I'll come back to this at some point. And then when I finally did, I came across Doug Casey, and then I started reading about libertarianism and anarchism and Austrian economics, and all of a sudden everything made total sense. So that was my road. And I know you started up the Ludwig von Mises Institute in Japan before. Tell us a little bit about how that went.
So I when I woke up at the fallacy, and I was kind of trying to convince people that what I had in mind made sense before knowing about Mises and Rothbard. I was hiding in Tokyo, obviously, so I didn't find the right words. I was always bumping into trying to make sense out of why healthcare, you shouldn't force people, and my sentences would just not make sense. I would be emotional, I would be angry, vitriolic, and then suddenly I bump into this whole world out there. Following the internet, YouTube shows up 5 years ago, and then I discovered the Mises Institute, and I said, well, see, I've just found the Beatles. Okay, I gave it to you. I'm a crappy guitar player, and I wanted to write songs for you to understand what I had in my head. I couldn't do that. I'll just go and pick up all these great singers at the other end of the planet. They're in Auburn, so I just went and visited them. I don't think they, I mean, the guys I remember I met with Doug French and Jeffrey Tucker, and I think they were somewhat surprised to see me show up from Tokyo, of all places, and I'm not Japanese. And I thought that was an easy get rich scheme in a way, because I thought I'm just going to take all these books, I'm just going to copy all of them, and voila, there's all these Japanese people didn't know about this, and they're going to be plenty happy. I've got the solution for you for all your ills. It's all right there. You just read this once, and voila, we're all set. Let's just and we rebuild society, and off we go. And I tried to, and so I went and visited them, and they said just copy everything you want to copy. They were extremely generous, without obviously doing the we wanted to micromanage everything that happens. It was completely the other way around, actually. They just didn't know who I was. I was still coming from a conservative angle with Obama makes interesting speeches kind of angle 4 years ago or 5 years ago. So they just said, copy, just take what you want, which I did. And I had very limited success. Let's just put it politely. That's just the way I should phrase it. I bumped into a huge wall of it was a lot more difficult than I had thought. Obviously, Japan, just like France a little bit, has a very feudal society. You've probably seen it on TV. Have you ever been to Japan, by the way?
Yeah, I have. I've been to Tokyo numerous times, and all over the place. I spent one summer there.
It's a very unique and interesting country. I just love them, and it's a beautiful place. Having said that, it's very feudal in history. You just don't undo 2,672 years of verticality, if I can call it that way, with samurais and emperors, and you just don't undo that. Just like you can't do that in France as well. I just saw the elections in France a couple of months ago, and they just went from Sarkozy to Hollande, which is obviously probably equivalent to people going from Bush to Obama, which made sense obviously because a lot of people thought that Bush didn't make sense, so whatever's not Bush has to make sense in a way, which is a reflex. Probably back then made a lot of sense to a lot of people. Japan is very feudal, and so the idea of just bringing in Mises to Japan, I thought I would get funding. I thought everybody would just jump on me to ask questions. I mean, I had 12 people in the group, and I was struggling to get them every Sunday. And I noticed that you just don't export these things. You just can't. You have to localize these stories. You just don't bring Jefferson, or you just don't bring Voltaire to Japan and expect everybody in any country to make sense out of the liberty movements abroad, because they all have their histories, they all have their traditions. Here, it's a samurai, it's an emperor. So it borrows a little bit from for example, some aspects of the emperor in Japan is reminiscent, and I when I say it out loud, a lot of people dislike my saying it, but it reminds me a little bit of the Muslim of the way Islam works. I mean, if you look at the way some of the people behaved in 1944, 1945 with all these kamikaze or Pearl Harbor per se, as they would, just get their thing on their forehead, take their plane, and just drive their plane, shouting, banzai to the emperor. I mean, the only other people I know who do that kind of stuff on the planet today are pretty much the guys at 9/11 or the fundamentalists. So different countries have different ways. If I was in Dubai 2 weeks ago, and there it was Ramadan, it's Islam, and it's a different it's a different coercion. I'm tempted to argue that the guys in Dubai, for example, clearly, obviously, had a lot more economical liberties than whatever I've ever felt in any other countries. So it's a different blend. But Japan, yes. So I tried to import the Mises material, very limited success, and so I've been working on that for a couple of years, I guess.
That's very interesting, and I think that is a good point that not necessarily everybody can understand this stuff. It does need to be localized, so maybe you can find a way to localize it at some point. I know you also have gone on from that now, and you're trying to help awaken freedom in Japan, and you've started up the Tokyo Tea Party. How's that been going?
Okay, so the Tokyo Tea Party, there's this other fellow, this Japanese guy, and so the Mises one I was on my own pretty much. It was just me and my own self, so it was a bit of a difficult challenge. The Tokyo Tea Party was actually thought of by this guy called Yuya Watase, a very fine, very interesting gentleman, very young in his early 30s, probably late 20s. And he's been pulling a lot. He's been pushing. He's been gathering people. Now he has 2,000 people, believe it or not, following him. So it's moving very well. We're hoping to launch a radio show, which is something unheard of probably in Japan, kind of a libertarian talk show where where people would be invited to call and ask questions. I know a lot of people in the U.S. have that. I see a lot of, for example, Tokyo, New York Tea Party Patriots or whatever the names are, and they all have their own talk show. They invite people, they have guests, and so the discussion is alive, well and alive. I do notice that verticality in a society comes as a kit with silence. I mean, it's the IKEA package. If you really, I mean, a feudal or a vertical society needs silence as one of its legs to stand, because if you remove silence, if the discussion is on the table all the time, there's no way a feudal society can make it ultimately. It feeds on the silence of people, and it feeds on people agreeing or at least nodding and not saying anything. And so Japan is a culture where silence is golden. So we're trying something new. It's unclear how it's going to be received, but the people here are extremely tired. So I mean, the country Japan has tried everything under the sun. They've invited Krugman. They've invited all the charlatans you can think about. And every time, of
I'm
course,
surprised that's not working out for them.
well, yeah, but I mean, it's part of the circus. Yeah, they just invite the morons who come and blab nonsense on TV. As a result, all the kids say, "I just don't understand what the guy talks about." So obviously, economy was not for me, and so we're just going to inflate to help unemployment because the CPI. So even the sentence doesn't make any sense. But they don't care. I mean, they just don't. They blab nonsense. People listen to nonsense, and people just realize they don't understand nonsense, which is the only good part. They just realize. So a lot of people are tired in Japan. A lot of people are ready for a new option. And the good thing is, 99% of the people here have zero interest in politics or zero interest in history or economy. And you probably wanted to argue, well, this is not a good thing. Well, really enough, it's a good thing because at least they don't have to go through all the unlearning that a lot of people have to go through. So, for example, when I was a kid, my social structure was I had Hitler on the right and I had Stalin on the left. And somehow, between these two despots and these two crackpots, Canada was somewhere in the middle. And because we were in the middle, that just made sense and we were just a viable society. So that's how my teachers introduced the whole concept. So Hitler is kind of a fascist and fascism is on the right. Stalin is a despot, but it's completely different. It's like it's just not the same thing, but he's on the left. And as a result, there's communism, so communism, fascism, and we're in the middle. And by being in the middle, I mean it's I have to laugh. It's just it's so ridiculous. I mean, me believing it at the age of 14 or 16 doesn't make any sense, but me noticing that some guy at the age of 40 or 50 was actually teaching it that way. So the guy was my age back then, and that's the way the guy who was teaching history would actually present things to kids, and that's, I mean, the cancer has metastasized. I mean, there's no other polite way to put it. If by the time the history teachers teach nonsense, and it's interesting because I've been reading Montesquieu, so mother tongue being French, I can access a lot of these things in French, and the one of the René Descartes actually, he was one of the first guys to really embark on we have to move a little bit closer to whatever enlightenment was about to become in Europe back in the 16th 17th century. And the guy in his book called Discours de la Méthode, he said that everything which is taught in schools, in state schools back then, is speculative. That's the way he phrased it back then. He said it just makes no sense whatsoever. It's all completely made out of nothing, and we really have to find a way to rethink things true. And he came up with his method of trying to put things together and make sense out of material, because the state schools or whatever the king was providing to people was speculative at best. That's the way he phrased it. So obviously it's not a new problem. I'm just waking up to the problem more than the problem being a problem in itself, kind of thing.
Yeah, the all those decades of state public indoctrination have really done their job by the looks of things. For me, I never even went to college. I actually went to went to college for like one day. I went to Economics 101 and I walked out and I said, well, that was stupid. And I said, that doesn't make any sense. And you look at it, you look at economics, most of it's Keynesian in school, sure. So that's all wrong. You were just talking about history, a lot of the ideas on at least trying to analyze history are all wrong. And even things like physics and astronomy. There's lots of stuff. I'm no expert, but a lot of it seems to be wrong. It's just unbelievable, most of the stuff. And then you see a lot of these communist kids, these Occupy Wall Street, and they want their free education. Well, it's not even education to begin with. It's so they want a free indoctrination. It's really what they want. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Once again, the guys, the real culprits are not the kids, because these adults, these psychopaths, I mean, they're dying to parasite on kids. And I have to say, I mean, it's as ugly as it may sound to say, I mean, we really rank as an animal species way better than a cow or a sheep to domesticate. I mean, we more easily domesticated than cows. Than us, I don't know any animal that will just close the door back on itself if you open it. First of all, like if you open the door of a cow, the cow will start running one way or another. I mean, we're the only one race that will close the door back on ourselves. And not only that, but we provide for the best revenues. I mean, we have the biggest brains. We can think things through. We can come up with softwares and whatnot, buildings. We can. So I mean, who wouldn't like if you ever wanted to, abuse a given resource, oil, or corn or cows or whatever that may be. I mean, it's obvious that the best one, the most easily controllable resource remains human kids. And I mean, it's really disturbing to say, but I think at some point we're going to have to come up with a lot more truth than what we've been exposed to, and that's the way the world works. I think all these the Matrix, the Orwell guys have tried to make metaphors because they just don't want to put their fingers too much in the machine and not be exposed as the guys who revealed how society actually really works, to avoid the objection of a lot of people. And I think Shakespeare said it best. Usually it's people shoot the messenger. When you come up with a bad news, people don't shoot the message, or people don't focus on the message, they shoot the messenger. So a lot of these wise men have always been invited, or tempted at least, to cover up their story so as to not be too upfront and to let people figure out their own ways through the metaphor on their own, instead of just being played blunt and saying, tax is theft, and tax is that's all the damages that taxation creates and whatnot, and you're a slave, and this guy is milking you, because this kind of truth obviously just doesn't work well on a lot of people. I'm not sure. Maybe it wouldn't have worked on me 20 years ago if I heard it. So yeah, there's a lot of damage. I'm regarding Keynes being wrong. I'm almost tempted now to argue that Keynes is right. He fooled everybody. He's probably one of the most sinister, evil mind who managed to exactly play the books exactly like the ruling class, the elite, wanted it to be played. I mean, the guy has linked inflation to unemployment. So now, if you have unemployment, the next thing that the government needs to do is to print a bazillion amount of money. And so, I mean, it makes no sense whatever way people think about it, but that's the way it's presented. And he's really managed to trick kids into not only false econ material, but econ material that really pleases the agenda of the government. And I think in that he may well be a lot more disturbingly smart and evil than many of us think he was, I would say.
Oh, I thought he was always very evil, but
I thought he was just dumb for a while. I mean, I just, like, for some time I just couldn't believe that such evil would actually exist. I mean, it was disturbing when I realized that these guys actually, it's all on purpose. I thought, what does this guy not see that is just in front of him? Like the sun is in the middle, all these planets turn around. It's obvious. Look, and I really was a sweet, innocent adult, because I just thought, well, this guy is he's just not smart enough. He doesn't get it, and he's dumb, and obviously not. I mean, he's much more evil and much more twisted than a lot of people would think, I believe.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Japan's been basically following his roadmap now for over 2 decades, and it's not getting any better yet. No one seems to ever be able to figure it out.
Well, and so the damage. I remember Al Gore using. I remember Al Gore using once in his movie the example of the frog in a boiling pot. You may have heard about it. If you drop a frog in the pot and you heat up gradually, the frog doesn't notice that it's sitting inside boiling water, and it dies at some point. Whereas if you just drop it in boiling water, it will just jump out immediately. And he used that to talk about global warming and how the state needed to jump in and just tax people more in order to help with global warming. But this guy, I mean, Al Gore, without knowing it, or was he smart enough to know it? But this whole frog in the pot example, I mean, that's us. That's taxpayers. I mean, it's nobody but the taxpayer who's every year milked a little bit more The regulations as they go high, we have limited and more limited choices. I mean, now, I mean, I'm not even in the banking sector, and I know the names of all the banks. I mean, how can that be? I mean, we only have 10 or 20 or 5 or 8 banks left, because it's impossible to launch a new bank. So the more it goes, the less banks we have, and as a result, I mean, it's as if they were nationalized. They might as well just nationalize them, because having 3 of them is probably worse than having one big nationalized bank. I mean, I'm not sure that's true, but still, the regulations are so high that's that it's really hard to give competition. So yeah, Japan is no exception. I would say Japan has been the leader pretty much, and they've been suffering for quite a while. We're talking about the yen was launched in 1871. It was launched in May 10th of 1871. So that's 150 years ago. And back then, 1 yen was presented as equal to 1.5 pure gold. And if you take 1.5 pure gold today, well, you get something like I think it's 4,500 yen per gram of gold. So we're talking about 7,000 yen for 1.5. So we're talking about an increase in 7,000 times. So they've printed 7,000 times the amount of money which was in existence back 150 years ago. So inflation is through the roof. The CPI numbers, so the way to compute the amount of money in circulation, equations are so distorted they don't mean anything anymore. You've got computers in there, hedonics here, which is nothing means anything anymore. And everybody who's got half a brain cell works for the government, so nobody complains. Meanwhile, you have all these people who don't get married, who don't have kids, who can barely live in a small apartment. You have kids. There's bullying. Bullying is at the agenda, and they keep on raising taxes every year. And the lies in the newspapers. I mean, there's not even a single newspaper which will come up and say, you know, at some point we may need to think things through, because they're all pretty much, the regulations are so high that if they lose the capacity to be in business, or if they challenge the state, I mean, overnight they can, you know, they're out of business, and they also have families, so it's really difficult for them to make that kind of sacrifice of letting go of a job just to do what's right. The cost has become too expensive of trying to suggest differently. So yeah, it's going to take a lot of courage. And this guy that I was talking about, Yuya Watase, has that kind of courage. He has that kind of drive, and the team around him also. You've got a lot of good Japanese kids. We're talking about people in their 20s mostly, are really pushing and pulling things. So yeah, there's interesting things coming up, and we're starting to branch out. So we've been in touch, and there are a lot of people on this planet. I mean, it's interesting to see how the whole starfish concept of all these different groups around the world are starting to get together. But that was also an initiative from Japan, pretty much. If you want me to talk about that, that's also something to cover eventually.
Sure, go ahead.
So Yuya Watase, Japan is very late in its liberty movement. It only has one single man who traveled abroad in 1850 and came back and wrote extensively, and he created the industrial revolution of the 1860s, 1870s in Japan. And so besides that, Japan is a very feudal country, samurais, emperors, and people paying taxes to these guys. So Yuya Watase wanted to branch out, and what he did in April of this year, he organized a worldwide Tea Party party. So he got in touch with everybody he could get in touch with that had any form or equivalent of Tea Party group. So the guys in Italy, the guys in Australia, the guys in Israel. And so he created kind of a worldwide, everybody parties, all these Tea Party equivalent party groups gets to party on one same day. And so suddenly what that created was kind of an interesting momentum. Suddenly people in Australia would exchange with us. We would, you know, swap information with people in Italy. Before you know it, Argentina would show up, other groups would show up, Israel would show up. And so that led to a new momentum to the movement. Now we've got, I think, 20 to 30 countries And just last month, we were all pretty much invited, if you want, by the group called the Freedom Works. You may have heard of them. They're very active politically, at least. They're very close to the political scene. They're pushing people. They're, you know, a lot of tough love on some of the people who want to run for office, and they have a lot of people with them. So they organized a huge event in Dallas. We're talking about like 80,000. They had the whole Cowboy Stadium, a very American style kind of thing. You just like 80,000 people, people everywhere, huge rock bands playing and whatnot. And they invited literally 30 countries from everywhere around the world. So you had Serbia, you had Georgia, you had Italy, Israel, and now the movement is starting to grow. It's kind of an interesting game. We're talking about like a worldwide phenomenon, and typically these people don't usually, you know, get together too well. It's we're talking about very individualistic people who don't want to be seen repeating what others repeat. So it's kind of difficult to get all these libertarian people to learn from each other, to at least, you know, try to not repeat everybody else's mistake and try to learn from each other without having to do this, you know, I think the way you think, just because we all should think together. But yeah, we've been embarking on an interesting tangent, and I think it's an interesting thing to follow it if for people at your end who follow from different locations. I'm sure you have a pretty international crowd. We're talking about 20 to 30 countries who have really seriously, relatively robust tea parties, and we're all connecting. We're all kind of learning from each other without, you know, belonging to or having to repeat whatever the other guy says. And it's a very, very interesting moment, I think, thanks to the internet, pretty much.
That is very interesting, and yeah, thanks to the internet. I think without the internet, we would have no chance whatsoever. Does the Tokyo Tea Party have a website that people can go to?
Correct. It's I'll send it to you. I don't know if you can post it on your webpage if you want. I'll make sure to send the link. Tokyo Tea Party on Google will lead you there immediately, but I'll make sure to send the exact URL to you. But we do have a homepage. The problem with the Tokyo Tea Party homepage is it's only in Japanese, so we apologize for that. We're working on an international, more English webpage. We also have the worldwide Tea Party event that took place in April, which we hope to repeat every year, by the way. So if people want to join from other countries, they're more than welcome. We rent a bar, and everybody from that country just goes there, and we try to have live camera feed and whatnot, just to you know, to encourage kind of the movement. And that also has a web page which has a bit of English on it. And so the Freedom Works team in the U.S. in Dallas, who invited us, they tried to cover all of us, the Israeli guys, and ultimately, I mean, it was beyond borders. There was no Israeli guy there. There was no Japanese guy there. You just had people with you know, interesting things to say, or so I claim. And so it was an interesting moment. And they have, the Freedom Works people have a web page in English, which may make for an easy link for a lot of people if they want to follow this whole international, if they really wanted to look for their Serbian or Greek or Australian or Italian Tea Party, they can find it very easily on that page. I'll send you all 3 links if you want.
Okay, great. Yeah, and we'll put those links to the videos or to the webpage right below our video on YouTube. And I know it's about 2 in the morning there, so we'll let you go, Marc. Thank you very much for being on with us.
Thanks to you. Thanks for all the great work as well, and look forward to receiving you, welcoming you in Japan one day in the near future.
Yeah, I look forward to it too. And that's all for today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so this has been Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.